right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals, a regular meeting for May 27th, 2020. Excuse me. The first item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum. We have 2 members here present, and Ms. King is on the phone with us, so that makes 3 members of our 5-member board, and I believe Mr. Tipps will be joining us shortly. So I believe we do have a quorum there. We'll proceed. The next item is a consideration of our minutes from our meeting on April 22nd, 2020. Are there any changes necessary to those minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider those minutes approved and move on to new business. Our first item is a variance request. This is application Z20023 by Mr. Clyde Roundtree of Huddleston Steel Engineering for Believers Tabernacle. They are requesting a variance from the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which states that parking areas for institutional group assembly uses shall not be located in the required front yard. This variance request pertains to a proposed parking lot at an existing institutional group assembly use, and in this case that's a church, and this is for property in a residential RS-15 zone. The property is located at 700 County Farm Road and on the adjacent parcel to the west identified there on the tax map. Mr. Ware, I believe that's your application, if you would go over that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On April the 24th of this year, the BZA approved a special use permit for the church, and one of the conditions of the special use permit was that either the parking lot had to be removed out of the front setback, or they would have to request a variance from the BZA in order to put a parking lot and some spaces in the front setback. As you said before, the church is located in the RS-15 zoning district. The setback for the property in the RS-15 zoning district is 40 feet. The church is requesting a 23-foot variance into the 40-foot setback, encroachment into this front setback. According to the applicant, shifting the parking lot out of the front setback will result in considerable construction costs for the church, as well as a loss of natural area and mature trees due to substantial rock outcroppings and elevation changes, which will require the removal of 10 to 12 mature trees. Also, removing the rock, according to the applicant, will require blasting and grading and the construction of a retaining wall to stabilize the ground. According to the applicant, the grades at the rear of the property have not been changed to create the current conditions. If the board approves this request, staff recommends the following condition of approval. A revised site plan with the updated parking lot design must be submitted for administrative review and approval. The applicant is in attendance for any questions that you may have, and also I can answer any questions you may have as well.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for staff at this point? Mr. Roundtree, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Chairman Young, members, BZA, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here representing for Believers Tabernacle. Pastor Haynes is here as well, and so is Bill Huddleston, who's been requested to be at this meeting, and Bill can talk a little bit more about the topographic concerns. Pastor Haynes has a few updates to talk to you about the parking lot itself, and I just wanted to say, as far as typically, if it is a self-created situation, then that's something that you'll have a hard time approving. However, with churches, it's kind of different. The church has a long history, well over 100 years it's been in this location. It's lived within this location, it's expanded this location, and the most optimum place for this parking lot to be built is where we're putting it right now, because it is fairly level, fairly open area. As you progress back towards the rear of the lot, it does change topographically, as Bill can allude to if we need to. The new sanctuary expansion area of the church, basically the front of the church, is also in that front setback, and I just want to bring that to your consideration. So the parking lot is really in relationship to the front of the building, and that's been one of our concerns, to make sure that the visibility of the building is not obstructed by any kind of vegetation, and trying to really leverage just to making sure that there's clear insight to how you get into the church in relationship to the parking. So as you can look on the other side of the site plan, that the parking is still, it's just not very efficient on the opposing side of this area. So we feel like the result of the church growing is really what catalyzed this situation, and that's a good thing. So it's not probably the end of the story as far as parking requirements for the future of Believers Tabernacle, but right now this can help alleviate some of the immediate pressures they have. So we would respectfully ask for your approval of this BZA request. So with that, Pastor Hammond, would you come and share a little bit about what the future is for the parking area?
And while Pastor Hammond is coming, Mr. Ware, would you mind putting it on the site plan view? I think one more. Thank you.
Thank you. As Clyde has already stated, we are trying to appeal to get our parking lot with the variance application we've put in. I'd like to bring to your attention that on the opposite side of the existing building right now, we have a parking lot that's there that I believe was grandfathered in when we purchased the property in 2009. The building, of course, was there, so the building's already got a variance. So trying to reach out to the board and everyone to see if it's possible to move the parking lot back to within the encroachment to keep everything clear and visible for our members coming into the church. I believe it'll be a safer move for the church as a whole. And also I want to bring to your attention as well that on the west side we have a development that's coming into existence there, and I believe that we are in a type B buffer at this point, and I'd like to see if it's possible to appeal before you, if it's possible for you to take into consideration to reduce the type B buffer to a type A. Reason being is the church is, as a whole, a place in the community that we like to leave visible for all coming to attend the church, and also for special events. The dense buffer in type B will prohibit a lot of visibility at this point. Also, we are at this time negotiating to purchase at least 2 or 3 lots on the west side of the property where our buffer would be installed. So I'd like to appeal to the board if it's possible to consider us in this matter. We have not signed any contract with the property. I'm meeting at the end of the week at a round table to discuss final agreements and price and such like in a contract on the property. So I know that's off the little beaten path, but we appreciate any consideration for the variance. And also I just wanted to respectfully just mention that to you. I feel it will be working a little backwards if we put the buffer in now and then have to move them in a few months. So if you'll take that into consideration, I certainly would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
So to the west of you, that you're considering purchasing that piece of property. Is that,
Yes, sir.
looking at the aerial, that's an empty piece of property currently?
Yes, there's actually 15 acres on the west side of us, and we're looking to purchase probably half of that, which will include about 4 lots west of us.
Along County Farm Road?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Chairman Young, I did want to mention, Mr. Hammond, or Pastor Hammond and I talked about this at length, and we told him that the board can't grant a variance to the buffering requirements. That's a special use permit condition. In order to modify the conditions of the special use permit, he would have to make application for a special use permit amendment. So what's at issue today is only the parking variance to allow parking in the required front yard, not the type of buffer along that property line. And what I mentioned to him over the phone a week or so ago was that if they do purchase the property next door, then perhaps we can look at shifting that buffer to their new property line. But I told him that personally, that with the board just approving the special use permit with the type B buffer, that until some of the circumstances change, that there would be, in my opinion, little reason to change that. But I told him that could potentially be a special use permit amendment request in the future if and when they purchase the property to the west. But I don't want to, and Mr. Ives may chime in here, but I don't want this particular item to become about something that it's not about, because we have not advertised a request for an amendment to the special use permit to modify that buffer, and I think it would probably not be appropriate to opine on that until such time as they make a formal application to do that.
I concur with Mr. Blomley, right, that it was not advertised, so we need to just look at the parking lot situation in terms of the variance for the parking to encroach into the front setback. It should be the only issue we can address today.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
All right, anything else the applicant would like to add?
Good afternoon, Chairman Young, members of the board. I'm Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I wrote a letter to the planning director about the variance request to allow parking in the front setback. I think it's part of your packet, but I want to point out two things that are unique to this case that you don't see normally. Number one, the building on this property is 163 years old. That predates the Civil War, so it's a historical building. Number two, it sits on the what I think is the steepest hill in Murfreesboro. We called it Tiger Hill growing up. We used to sled out there if it ever snowed. So those two things combined make this a unique case, and I think it's good evidence to ask for this variance because there's some beautiful trees right behind where we have this parking lot designed. If we have to pull these parking spaces out of the front setback, it pushes our parking lot back into those beautiful trees, and we'd have to build a retaining wall, so we lose historical significance as far as aesthetics go on this property. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have of me at this time.
Any question, Mr. Huddleston? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else the applicant would like to add? All right, at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward and give us your name and address and provide us with any comments. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
And Chairman Young, I would mention a couple things. Mr. Ware mentioned that it's approximately 23 feet from the parking lot's about 23 feet from the front property line. This request is not for a specific amount. He was providing you that information to tell you about where the parking lot lines up, but this would just be a variance to the request that parking is prohibited in the required front yard. Of course, they would be bound to construct the parking lot generally as it's been shown in the concept plan that's before you. Another thing, I think that because Ms. King is remote today, I think it would probably be a good idea for us to do the roll call vote. And Ms. Davis isn't mic'd up, so I'd be happy to take care of that for Ms. Davis when we have a motion on the floor.
All right.
I'll make a comment. One, and even though they're asking for a variance into the front setback, it looks like that according to the site plan that we saw earlier, the parking lot is pretty much in line with the front of the building. So I don't think it's the appearance of it is going to cause an issue. I think that Mr. Huddleston's points with respects to the topography meets the practical difficulties as part of the variance motion. The physical features with respects to the trees and the rock that we saw in the picture as part of the submittal. And then the variance won't impair adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property. The variance will not unreasonably increase the congestion in the public streets and not increase the danger of fire, and it would not endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or morals or welfare of city residents. And so with that, I will make a motion to approve the variance.
I'll second.
Is that motion subject to staff comment?
Yes, subject to staff comments. And as you discussed, we're not talking about the buffer at this point in time.
I'll also second those.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Matthew?
All right, we'll call the roll. Trying to,
Yeah.
alphabetical order in my head. Okay. Vice Chairman Halliburton.
Aye.
Ms. King.
Aye.
Mr. Tips.
Aye.
Chairman Young.
Aye. All right, the ayes have it. That application's been approved. Thanks for your time. Next item on our agenda is a special use permit, application Z20015 by Mr. Joey Rouse for TNT Fireworks East. They're requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment, in this case a seasonal fireworks retailer, in a commercial highway zone. And this is for property located at 2050 Las Casas Pike. I believe Mr. Cooper has this one for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. The applicant is requesting a special use permit to locate a fireworks tent outside of the Kroger anchored shopping center on the corner of Las Casas Pike and North Rutherford Boulevard. This site would be for the July 4th sales season, which would go through June 28th, through July 5th. The hours of operation would be from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. with extended hours until midnight on July 3rd and July 4th, which is consistent with the other applications that we receive regularly. There is a fireworks tent across the street that occurs pretty regularly, which pulled up on your screen would be across Las Casas Pike in the parking lot of the old, I believe Matthew told me that was a Food Line and a thrift store back in the day, before my time anyway. So I would just like to read the conditions of approval that we would place on the application. The applicant shall provide certification that the tent is flame resistant or treated to be flame resistant. The applicant shall keep and maintain a fire extinguisher on site at all times. The applicant shall keep the city's firework ordinance posted on the site at all times. Fireworks shall not be set off on site. The applicant shall apply for and pass as electrical safety inspection prior to the opening for business. An electrical permit shall be purchased from the Building and Codes Department in order to obtain this inspection. The firework tent shall meet all minimum setback requirements for the CH zoning district and temporary firework vending standards. In addition, a tent permit must be purchased from the Building and Codes Department as well. I believe you'll have to have a public hearing and a motion for this. I'm here for any questions, as well as the applicant, Joey Rouse, is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Mr. Rouse, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Joey Rouse with TNT Fireworks Austin laid everything out fine, and it's been great working with y'all for a long time, and we're just expanding with Kroger's. If there's any question, I'd feel free to answer any with y'all.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rouse? No. I think we'll let you off the hook.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Appreciate
This time we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or a motion.
Just a question, is this site in lieu of the one across the street, or has there been an application made for the one across the street?
There's already an application for the one
Okay.
across the street.
All right.
One thing I did want to add is, as someone who worked with you guys for many years and had many busy spring months of March, April, and May doing fireworks applications to you guys, as you notice, the agendas are much shorter these days for numerous reasons. But 2 or 3 years ago, we put in the ordinance that repeat locations can be approved administratively after the first year, and so. What y'all aren't seeing is the large amount of work that Mr. Cooper, Ms. Rush, and Ms. Davis are doing with all the other tents that are repeat tents that are coming through, like the one across the street. And so it's, we probably, Austin, maybe 12 or 13 additional ones besides this one?
Yeah, I'd say about there,
So we'll still have a pretty good volume of them that come up each.
for sure.
Yeah. None in gravel lots, though.
Good deal.
I'll mention that I frequent this facility or this parcel of land, and I think that's a very good placement of where it's going to be, just with respects to the way the traffic would work and the fact that you don't usually see a lot of people parking that far out in that particular aisleway. So with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the, what are we calling it, special use permit.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Ball?
Subject to all staff comments.
Yes.
Sorry.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Balmy?
All right, we'll call the roll. Vice Chairman Halliburton.
Aye.
Ms. King.
Aye.
Mr. Tips.
Aye.
Chairman Young.
Aye. That one's been approved. Thank you. Our next application is another special use permit, application Z20022 by Mr. Robert McLean, requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment, in this case produce sales, in a commercial highway zone. This is for property located at 1807 Memorial Boulevard. Mr. Cooper, if you'd review that application for us.
Thank you very much. The applicant, Mr. McLean, is requesting a special use permit to locate a 12 by 12 tent to operate as a produce stand on MTCS Road in the parking lot outside of Haynes Hardware. The application period would be from June 2nd through October 17th. However, the dates of operation would be 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday to maintain our under 70 days. I believe it would be about 60 days that they would be in operation throughout the year. The tent would be set up in daily, and I will read the conditions of approval as well. The tent shall be weighted by above ground, and no stakes or other apparatus should be penetrating the surface of the parking lot. The tent permit shall be obtained from the Building and Codes Department prior to the tent being erected. A more detailed site plan drawn to scale and showing the exact location of the tent shall be submitted for review and approval by the Planning Department and Transportation Departments prior to the issuance of a tent permit. Additional traffic control measures may be required by the Transportation Department prior to the beginning of operation. If you have any questions for me, and the applicant is also in attendance, if you have any questions for him.
Any questions for staff?
I've got a question for Mr. McLean. Mr. McLean, it is, I think what I heard was the tent's coming down every night? Yes. All right, even though you might be doing it Tuesday and Thursday, it's coming down. Is everything going to leave the site as the tent would?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Anything else you'd like to add to the application, Mr. McLean?
No,
Okay.
you pretty much covered it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the special use permit, subject to the conditions set forth by our planning department.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Blomley.
Yes, sir. We'll call the roll. Vice Chairman Halliburton.
Aye.
Ms. King.
Aye.
Mr. Tips.
Aye.
And Chairman Young.
Aye. That application has been approved. Next item on our agenda is staff reports and other business.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Young. I'm going to pass out something to y'all. Tips, if you could take one and pass it down. About a week or so ago, our city council passed on second and final reading. Actually, it was more than a couple weeks ago, an ordinance amendment that Mr. Ives recommended. We're kind of not revamping, but kind of touching up, if you will, Section 10 of the zoning ordinance dealing with variances. And Mr. Ives will just go over the reasons for that. And we're not going to go over in detail that Section 10. I think at a later date we'll give you more information on that. But what we wanted to do was to give you a copy of it. And because our variance applicant today got their application in before this went into effect, we were still applying the old Section 10 to them. And so what we want to do is, going forward, beginning with next month, if we get any variances, we would apply the new Section 10. And I wanted to get each of y'all a copy of that. Mr. Ives can just hit the highlights of it. And also, before he does that, I did want to mention also that this ordinance amendment does contain the change regarding the height of lighting fixtures at recreational fields, which I promised y'all I would take to the Planning Commission and City Council back in November. And so it has gone through the process, and so hopefully y'all won't be put back in that position again because of this amendment. So, Mr. Ives.
Thank you, Matthew. Essentially, my attempt was to consolidate the ordinance, this section of the ordinance, into something that I hope is more understandable both for staff and for you and for applicants who might be coming to seek a variance. It is not our intent to change any of the substantive requirements. It seemed there were multiple approaches in the old Section 10, and there were references to property and then references to land, and I think references to a lot, and there was some potential confusion caused by those references, and the fact that the requirements seem to have been piecemeal stated in different parts of the section. So the attempt was to consolidate all of that into a more straightforward presentation without intending to substantively change anything, but again, hopefully for clarification for everybody. And as y'all go over this, we get together, I'll be happy if anybody wants to give me a call. I'll be happy to talk to you about that, or if we want to talk about it in a future public session, or we've also considered having, thought it might be time for another short lunch and training session and talk about this here over in the next short period of time.
But because this had just passed and would be what we apply beginning next month, we wanted to go ahead and get you all a copy of it. And this ordinance amendment contains some other things like lighting standards that I mentioned, some landscaping standards. So it's broken down into 4 sections, and the section dealing with Section 10 of the zoning ordinance is Section 2 of this ordinance amendment. So it begins about midway down on the first page and goes through towards the bottom of the 3rd page. So just wanted to get you all a copy of that for your reference as we move forward with future variance requests.
Sounds good. Thank you, Matthew.
Sure.
Anything else?
I have nothing further.
Move we adjourn.
Second. If that's appropriate.
Sounds good. We will adjourn.
Right.